Well, Nancy and I, this was a really taxing ordeal for her as well as it was for me. And we agreed that she has no family in the state of Maine. Her family's all in Colorado. And we agreed that if the direct appeal failed, that we'd go through with a divorce and so that she could go back home to her family. The farm was overwhelming her. The business was more than she could manage. It wasn't designed for one person. So the direct appeal did fail, and we did divorce, and we sold the farm, and she moved to Colorado and to be closer to her family. She eventually remarried. She wanted to start her own family, which was something that we were looking forward to doing. And she sent her husband to be over here to meet with me, and I thought he was a great guy and told her so. And so we stayed in touch pretty regularly right up until they had their first child. And at that point it became uncomfortable for her husband to have me in their lives. He didn't want to have to explain to his kids this part of their mother's past, and so he respectfully asked me, as she did, to bow out of their lives, and I did. You know, you love someone. I guess I've never stopped missing Nancy, and I certainly don't want to interfere in her life. But it's been hard. When I was arrested, I mentioned earlier that I'd been taken to the Lincoln County Jail, but I only stayed there for a few days and was transferred to Maine State Prison. It was evening when I got here, and as a matter of fact, I think we were a half hour getting into the prison. There was nobody to open the door, and we stood out there banging on the door to get into the prison. Finally, I was allowed in and was taken to this labyrinth, through this labyrinth of the prison, and you know, these hallways, narrow hallways that were curving this way and that, and stairs, and finally we get to a place which I later identified as segregation, and I was put in in a corridor with only 3 cells, known as restraint side. Commonly known as the hole. But there was a hot, dark corridor. There was a vestibule light. There were no lights in the cell. So to read, you had to, be right up against the bars to read or write. The lighting was so dim. It was July. It was brutally hot, and there were no windows. And the stench was just indescribable. And of course, the place had been in use since about the early 1900s, and it had almost a century of accumulated filth. It was beyond anything you can imagine. And my first night in this cell, I suffered from claustrophobia, which I never knew I never had that problem, but that cell was 40 square feet, 6 by 7, and it kept getting smaller, and it got to a point where I was in a complete panic for hours because the walls were pressing in on me, and I thought I was going to die in there. The claustrophobia was so bad, and I remember making a conscious decision to bury that claustrophobia, or I wasn't going to survive, and I fought it down, and I did. I was able to get it under control, and I can now live in small spaces. When I first came out into general population, and with these threats that had been made against me, and I'd actually had one, I think at the time he was a sergeant, tell me that if prisoners attacked me, that none of his guards would respond, that I was on my own. I still opted to come out here, and when I did, I found a fellow waiting for me. I'll just use his first name, Daryl. Great big burly guy, looked like a longshoreman, and I remember they put me on this corridor in this great big guy shows up and he says, "I've been waiting for you." And so I kind of said, "Oh, I guess this is it." And he said, "Yeah, well, what do you want?" He says, "Well," he says, I'm a Raytheon," he says, "I used to be a Raytheon systems engineer," and he says, "I haven't had a decent conversation in years." So he says, "I hear you're college educated." He says, "I've been looking forward to meeting you." So we actually hit it off pretty good and became friends, and he made my introduction into general population far easier than it otherwise might have been. It particularly bothers me that you know, there are people in here in this, and I've had, you know, people in management tell me that they know my case and believe in me. I've had people who basically run this place tell my supporters what they believe, and yet they don't hesitate to torture me along with the rest of them, and that's just the way it is. And that's, you know, how they sleep at night, well, you'd have to ask them. I don't get it. I just don't. You know, it's beyond my comprehension. My brother Don, when he comes to visit me, he brings my nephews along, and we have a wonderful time, but he confessed something to me one time, which I think illustrates just how hard this has been on my family. He told me that visiting me, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. He told me that when he visits me and leaves here, it's like mourning my passing. It's like he mourns my loss over and over again, and he says it's worse than anything I could imagine. You know, when you lose someone you love, you only lose them once. When you visit them in prison, you lose them over and over again, and it's really been hard for him. And I had no idea that, you know, it was that hard, but it is, and that's what happens when, you know, family loves each other. It's a tremendous hardship. Any case where there's forensic evidence, the forensic evidence should be preserved, it should be tested. The state should engage in this testing for the sake of truth, and prosecutors who are interested in nothing more than a conviction should be removed from those positions and replaced by people who are interested in pursuing truth. This isn't a game to win or lose, this is people's lives. Another thing that I think would be really important, and there are numerous causes for wrongful conviction. Eyewitness testimony is the leading cause of wrongful conviction in this country. As a matter of fact, it accounts for 6 of 10 cases. And there are numerous other causes that have been well documented, but none of these causes are ever taught at police academies. I think it would be a good idea for law enforcement personnel in training to recognize the things that cause wrongful convictions, to be aware of it when they're doing their police work. I think that could save a lot of grief in the future. So, you know, those are the types of things that I wrote about in that essay. I certainly had no shortage of cases to draw from. There are a lot of people in this country that have been exonerated, and the list continues to grow. I hope to be part of it soon.